Respectfully decline to answer the questions under the rights and privileges afforded to every citizen under the United States Constitution.
The 2020 Statement of Financial Condition contained false and misleading valuations and statements. Is that correct?
Same answer. Same answer. Same answer.
Is that your signature on page 2?
Same answer.
Hi again, everyone. It is 5 o'clock in New York. I'm Alicia Menendez in for Nicole Wallace. You know, there are two types of Donald Trumps under questioning. There is the one you just heard, pleading the fifth hundreds of times, not giving prosecutors anything. Then there's the one that is cruel, combative, and even mixes up his former wife with the woman accusing him of raping her.
She wouldn't be my type in any way, shape, or form. Whatever. You wouldn't be a choice of mine either, to be honest with you. I hope you're not insulted. Good at what he did. I don't even know who the woman. Let's see. I don't know who. It's Marla.
You say Marla's in this photo?
That's Marla. Yeah, that's my wife.
Which woman are you pointing to? No,
that's here.
Carol.
Oh, is that,
the person you just pointed to was Jean Carroll.
So on Monday, when Trump is expected to be the defense's final witness in the $250 million civil fraud trial, we do not know which of the two Trumps will appear on the witness stand. However, from everything we have seen since this trial began 42 days ago, all signs point to the latter. Monday will be the second time Trump will take the stand in this trial. The first time, you'll recall, was last month when he testified for the prosecution, an appearance marked by nasty attacks against the New York AG prosecutors and the judge. Trump has been in the courtroom multiple times since the trial began, as recently as yesterday, glaring at Judge Engoron and the New York AG's team, as well as lashing out in front of the cameras nearly any chance he got. Just yesterday, Trump complained that being at the Manhattan courthouse is keeping him away from campaigning in Iowa and New Hampshire. A blatant lie, as this is a civil trial, and defendants, they are not required to be in court. With this being just one of the many legal cases against Trump, he still has 4 criminal cases set to go to trial next year. The ex-president has framed himself as under attack. The New York Times writes about this looming collision between criminal defendant Trump and the 2024 candidate. He has tried to blur all 4 cases together in the public's mind as one giant witch hunt, yoking them to previous investigations into him. He has assailed the judges, prosecutors, and witnesses involved in the cases, leveraging moments when gag orders against him have been temporarily lifted. He has also mounted a sustained publicity blitz, comparing himself to Nelson Mandela, while portraying the indictments against him as retaliatory strikes by his political opponents, including Mr. Biden. And that is where we start today with a very full table. MSNBC legal analyst Lisa Rubin, MSNBC host and legal analyst Katie Phang, and host of the On Brand podcast, Donnie Deutsch. Friends, it is good to see you all. What happened today in court?
Today in court was more testimony from Elie Bartov. He's a New York University accounting professor. But Mr. Bartov was forced today to admit he's been paid almost $900,000 for his expert testimony in the case, and that's just since April of this year. The more interesting thing to me, Alicia, was where he says he's getting that money from. He says his bank statements show that the invoices have been paid by a combination of the Trump Organization on the one hand and the Save America PAC on the other. Save America made a single $40,000 plus payment to him in April of this year. We'll have to wait until FEC filings after the end of this year to see how much Save America and Donald Trump's donors have given to Mr. Bartov to try and rescue him from a case that has absolutely nothing to do with any actions that he even could have taken as president. They're solely in his capacity as his business.
And just to remind anyone who wasn't watching yesterday, this is a man who got up, told Donald Trump exactly what he wanted to hear, even started to go at it with the prosecutors.
Yeah, he did. At one point, one of the prosecutors said, kind of snidely, I will add, that Bartov was saying exactly what he was hired to say. And Bartov, in a sort of Trumpian way, just looked at him, put his finger out and said, you should be ashamed of yourself. And he said it several times. It was as if he had no idea where he was sitting, that he was in a courtroom where decorum was expected, but rather he went to that Trumpian place immediately. You could see why Trump liked him, and it wasn't just because he has a list of credentials a mile long.
What's the attitude going into next week?
I think the attitude going into next week is somewhat of trepidation, right? I mean, I know that Katie probably has a different opinion than I do about this. I still think it's unseen whether Donald Trump is actually going to show up. I think his lawyers are afraid that just by virtue of being in the courtroom next to Judge Engoron and his principal law clerk, there is a risk that he could violate the now in place gag order a third time. He's been fined already $5,000, then $10,000. But the penalties for contempt in New York, whether civil contempt or criminal contempt, and that just depends on how willful it is, include time in jail. And I think if you are Chris Kise and team, you've got to be thinking really seriously about, can my client control his impulses and his id when he's in the hallway or when he's sitting just feet from the principal law clerk, irrespective of the fact that that relationship has nothing to do with the testimony that they would want to elicit from him.
Do you think he shows up?
Of course.
And the risk, though, poses?
He doesn't care. I mean, Chris Kise, Alina Habba, you can fill in the blank. They don't control him. He does not care. He's looked at cash fines to begin with. The threat of incarceration looms large. He doesn't care. He'll convert that into another mugshot. He'll convert that into another fundraising machine. And he'll say, look, it's more evidence that the justice system is out to get me. So he's going to show up. And you know what? I think that he's actually not going to be out of control. It is a defense case in chief. It is the last defense witness. The defense controls his testimony. Now, whether or not he's able to control his temper when he's being cross-examined, I mean, we've kind of already seen it. When he was called by the AG's office, he was an adverse witness by definition. He was not on their side. And so even though he doesn't have the composure that's necessary in court, we've seen that he knows how to convert bad behavior into cash, and that's all he cares about.
Look, I agree with Katie. He'll absolutely be there. This is for him a nice moment. It's interesting. You would to go back to your point, you would think the donors that are giving money would somehow be upset to think that it's going for his defense. They're not. They're not. They're happy to pay it this way. Look, this is a guy who last week said, I'm going to be dictator day one. So I don't think he's worried about the effect of sitting with the AG about what the average American, or certainly the average Trump voter, thinks is just, it's money stuff. Rich guys do this all the time. So, look, he hasn't had to show up, and he has shown up. This is for him. This is part of his brand. I'm going to go in, and I'm going to take on the man, and I'm fighting the good fight the same way they would go after you. They're going after me. So there's no downside.
But isn't there a little bit of a duality in this case, given that you were talking about his business and subsequently that brand as well, right? You're talking both about the political brand that he has.
I'm talking about he's not happy about this from a business point of view. I mean, this really hurts him. This hits him in his gut. It talks about what a fraud he is. It talks about how inflated he is. So there's two sides to it. He is not happy what this will end up doing to his business. He can't do business in New York again after this. But as far as his political brand, it's a win for him. It's not a downside.
So if you were Fani Willis, if you were Jack Smith, and this all unfolds, he shows up on Monday, he takes the stand on Monday, what is it then that you were watching for?
Everything that he says. I mean, that's the point, right? He's a loose cannon, and he could be a loose cannon that inures to the benefit of any prosecutor who's looking at him. But remember, the actual facts of this case are limited in scope. They're actually focusing on a particular period of time, particular acts of conduct that are relevant to his business enterprises. That's it. If he goes off script, which inevitably he does, how far off script is what's really going to pique the interest of somebody like Fani Willis, somebody like Jack Smith. But at this point, really, it's what can he save? And there's really nothing left to save. The first count in the complaint that was brought by the New York AG, Letitia James, it's been the death knell. It has been the death blow to his businesses. That is what's going to be up on appeal. The rest of it is just honey. That is just icing on the cake for Letitia James. The other thing is this. It's a bench trial, and that's what we have to harp on over and over again. All of the grandstanding, there's no jury there.
Audience of one.
Exactly. The only person who gets a benefit for this is Donald Trump. Justice Engoron has made it perfectly clear what he thinks about Trump et al. All of those defendants, all of the business entities. But otherwise, Trump could do himself in for some of the other cases. But if he's kept on enough of a leash, maybe he won't.
But can I please build off something Katie said about him being a loose cannon? Judge Engoron has decided at some point to take a very different tact presiding over this trial. He was much tighter about applying the rules of evidence at the beginning of the case than he is now, largely because I think he's decided where he's going with his ruling, and he doesn't want the exclusion of evidence to be another basis for Trump's appeal. So he is letting these witnesses go on for much longer stretches on topics that are not related to the question before them in ways that Katie Katie and I would not recognize as traditional trial behavior, particularly in a federal court. It's really been stunning for me to watch how much rope he's given them. But we know very well when you give Trump a bunch of rope, he will inevitably hang himself. And I'm thinking about this gag order opinion that we got today from the D.C. Circuit because it quotes from two instances in which Trump has inadvertently hung himself. One, that infamous CNN town hall last May where he said, "My followers hang on my every word," effectively. And she used that, the panel used that as proof of why he needed to be restrained here. The other thing is that they quote from the affirmation that a New York court officer gave about the threats to Engoron and his principal law clerk, where he compiled 275 pages of transcripts of those recorded threats. That affirmation came in 2 days after oral argument. So if you don't think these judges and these prosecutors are all watching each other, you're deluding yourself.
The gag orders don't mean anything. I mean, you got to pay a $5,000. It adds to his, they're trying to shut me up and they can't shut me up. So this trial, as I said, is business. There's a real effect. I wish this wasn't happening as far as what his political futures. I think this just adds to his whole who I am, what they're trying to do to me, and they're coming after you also.
As you bat away the gag orders, which I understand. One, do you think that changes if there's the possibility of jail time? If we get to that point. Okay, then let me ask you this. This is a civil case. If you're talking about one of the criminal cases.
Different apples and oranges. So, come March, we're going to be talking a very, very different
Tell me why.
Well, because you're talking about a trial that is about trying to overthrow the election. We're talking about a trial that I think to many Americans, they go, no, that's something a little different here. I think to many people, even outside the Trumpers, they see this as a rich guy playing footsie. That's what rich guys do. Not that it's good, not that it's okay. And by the way, I have a feeling if you put many other real estate guys in that same position, you come up with the same kind of stuff. I'm the last guy to let Donald Trump off the hook. But I'm talking about the main event comes in March. It really, really does.
But do you think that changes his posture?
I think that changes his posture. Yeah, I think there's a little different being blustery about trying to overthrow an election and try and overthrow electorates and do things like that. I think it's a little more difficult to kind of navigate that the way it is navigate this. We'll see.